Really glad to have you on tonight as well, Jeremy, because we are talking about employment law and stuff, and what you do with your job is
Yep.
sort of as a contractor, which is what the government is saying. They're trying to sort of clear up all those areas. It might just be a bit of a red herring for them doing other things. I don't know. But to talk about this and to give us all the highs and lows and ups and downs is Anita Rosentreter, who is the Strategic Project Coordinator from First Union. Anita, welcome to the show.
Kia ora. Hi, Pat. Hi, Jeremy.
Hi, Anita.
Thank you for being with us. Right, now last night we featured the story that you were involved in with One News, this one here, and the story is headed up. Workplace Relations Minister Brooke Van Velden has unveiled her plans for this term, including overhauls of health and safety regulation and making changes to the Holiday Act. When they say these things out loud, sometimes they can make them sound like, oh yeah, I kind of get that, but most people who I've heard from are pretty nervous what this actually could mean for workers. So do you want to just, we'd like to throw you the ball to start off with and tell us what you think about these proposals for these changes that this current national-led government is looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think people are nervous for good reason. And obviously, changes can go either way. We could see changes in favour of workers, and you know, the previous Labour-led government was looking at making changes to the Holidays Act, for example, but those things would have been improvements for our workers. And unfortunately, where we're headed with this new national-led government is certainly towards the deterioration of quite significantly important and fundamental work rights.
Such as?
Health and safety, for example. I mean, health and safety is something that, you know, we're all kind of like grown at a little bit when we're the ones at work and we're being told to follow rules and things. But obviously we recognize why we have those laws, why they're so important. And we have to remember that the origin of our current Health and Safety Act was actually out of the Pike River mine disaster. So 28 mine workers were killed in that awful disaster. And, you know, we did a lot of work as a country to, you know, review what happened and try and introduce stronger laws to prevent something like that from happening again. And that act's only been in place for 10 years. And I would argue that it's not even really fully embedded out there. There's still a lot of employers who haven't really caught up. And partly that's because WorkSafe has been quite ineffective, which is a whole nother thing. But now we've got a new government coming in saying, actually, this is all much too onerous. You know, I was saying to my partner yesterday, he's a builder, you know, it's much too onerous to make sure that you don't die on a construction site, honey, you know, like it's just...
In fact, Brooke Van Velden said something, and I'm paraphrasing, she said something last night about the cost of having to keep, and I think she talked about people on building sites or working sites, kind of compliant with the law is becoming too much. And we read that as the cost of keeping people kind of equipped to the highest level of safety and good practice they want to get rid of. Now, if you follow that down the waterfall long enough, you get to unqualified people who are unsafe in the workspaces, which doesn't sound like a nice, safe place for the workers to be.
Nah, and there's a lot of it out there, you know. The law is designed to be like the minimum. You can do better than the law, and that's completely fine, but you shouldn't be doing any less than that. But unfortunately, that's just not the reality. And there's plenty of construction sites out there where they're not meeting even the most bare minimum laws. And other workplaces as well, obviously. Like, I don't want to just pick on construction, but we've got forestry, you know, fishing, all of these really high. Agriculture, I think, is probably even the most dangerous.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you were saying this law was, you know, came off the back of the Pike River tragedy, but I mean, our record in workplace safety, even prior to that, was pretty appalling, to be honest. I mean, particularly in certain industries. So, yeah, I mean, this law was a long time coming. And I mean, are you getting an indication of this is one of many things they've mentioned? Are you getting any indication of where you think this government's looking at going with it?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's one of many things. So they've sort of like pointed at the Holidays Act as well, at the certain aspects of the Employment Relations Act. The contractors thing is a really, really big issue because it's kind of another area where we're still seeing a lot of law breaking going on. Like this is the misclassification of workers, as we try to refer to it as, is actually rife. And again, construction is another. This is another instance where they're sort of not up to scratch. But I do a lot of work with Uber drivers, and Uber has swept all around the world. Just kind of completely ignored domestic laws and all of the markets they operate. Obviously employment laws, but also tax laws, transport laws, just like everything. And they've been getting away with it for now 10 years. So this year is the 10th year that they've been operating in New Zealand. They started under the previous national government. And so obviously like Labour fell short in this area as well during their previous time in government. But we were sort of dealing with the problem through the courts, and the courts are working exactly as they should. So they've said, actually, these drivers are employees. Like you've put before us, a description of the relationship. We talked about it back and forth in a courtroom for 3 or 4 weeks, I think it was, of back-to-back hearings. It's been very thoroughly analysed, and the chief judge of the employment court has said, no, these workers are definitely working for someone else's business. They don't have their own business. And so for the new government to kind of come in with this really arrogant sort of view of like, we don't even have that, they don't have that depth of understanding, right? Brooke Van Velden did not spend 4 weeks in court listening to those testimonies from those drivers, not to mention however many years, studying and practicing the chief judge has obviously done to become an absolute expert on this point of law. So to just come in and be like, actually, that's not right. We're going to do something completely different. We're going to let this company that is a multi-billion-dollar global company out of Silicon Valley just completely erode our most fundamental employment rights and protections. And it doesn't stop with Uber. Like we pick on Uber because they've kind of spearheaded this new model. And what we're seeing already is other companies following suit, right? Replicating their model in the area of small passenger vehicles and food delivery. But it doesn't stop there either, right? It's just going to keep spreading and spreading. There's even an instance of an app, a similar app being set up in home support. So carers who are going into the homes of elderly people are being engaged on an app that, I've heard people describe as like not dissimilar to Tinder, swipe right if you approve of this home support worker.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, you go, Jeremy.
Well, no, I was gonna say I think that's the thing. Uber is, it's obviously a really clear test case, but I think some people might hear about the Uber case and think, well, it's this multi-billion-dollar company, international. What are we going to do? But it is very prevalent here, and not just in businesses like that. I'm a freelancer. And everything I do is done on a contract basis, including certain office-based roles that I've had. If I've brought in, without going into details because I'm not quite sure what sort of NDAs I've been covered by, but I've had a case in the past where I was given the option of being a contractor or an employee, exactly the same job, exactly the same hours. I took the employee option because it was a novelty to me because I'd never had holiday pay or anything like that. It was like brand new. But it was even at the time, it was kind of bizarre to me that there was an option there because this isn't something I was coming in and doing for 24 hours. This is something I was doing full time for quite a long extended period of time. So that to me sounds like exactly the kind of gray area that I could see. And we're not talking about quote unquote mum and pop businesses here. We're not talking about this government love to bang on about small businesses and the expense that's incurred on them. And I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but these are big companies who are doing this because they can, because there's a loophole.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're driving other businesses out of the market because they have an unfair competitive advantage and they engage in predatory practices, And your description of that absurd situation you were in where they were like, do you want to be an employee or a contractor? Like what the court says is it doesn't matter. It doesn't even matter what you describe yourself as.
Right.
It's what is the relationship in practice. And so when the court interrogates this question, they look at all these different factors, which is why with Uber, sometimes we get people saying, what if drivers want to remain contractors? And sometimes there will be drivers who express that sentiment. And sometimes it's coming from a place of kind of misunderstanding really what the differences are.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's coming from a place where it's a genuine thing, and just even the prospect of employment just puts them off entirely. But and this sounds a little bit sort of like callous, and I don't mean to be, but it almost doesn't matter what the preference is, right? It's the court only cares about what the relationship is in practice. There's a definition in law of employee. Do you meet it or do you not meet it?
Wow. I'm wondering as well, as I said earlier, it feels like this current government's not even like leading up to the election. There was code words and there was dog whistles and over various topics. It sounds like now they're not even hiding it. Brooke Van Velden said in the article we looked at yesterday, she just said straight out, we've got to sort out what's best for business. She just put it out there. And obviously you hear a lot of people, and I think about, Marta McDavidson or Chloe or when Jacinda was in talking about the workers. There's this, sorry, this is a bit of a rant first and I'll ask my question. There's this place that the left has lost, and I've said this several times on the show, that when the right comes out and says, the CEOs don't like labels, the CEOs don't like left, the left needs to go, yeah, that's right, that's fine. The right, you guys can have the CEOs and we'll continue to be the parties of the workers on the ground. And what I was wondering from you is, when we hear the right, when we hear this current government just overtly saying we're going to do what's best for business, and you use that as sort of a foundation for what they're going to do to the Holiday Act, then that terrifies me, because it's good to say, let's sort out the Holiday Act. I mean, this Easter Sunday thing, okay, let's have that conversation. But when you then realise that the foundation, the place they're starting their conversation is what's best for business, that fills me with dread and fear. What do you guys in the union actually think about when you hear that? And do you agree that they're just basically trying to figure out what's best for business?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty terrifying, really, because what we've seen already is, a really significant erosion of workers' rights. And there's only more to come, right? And I think that they will become emboldened over time because they're passing all of this legislation under urgency and getting away with it. We don't have a culture in New Zealand of I don't know, in Australia one time, everyone just hung some bag of onions from the doorknob or something, and then Kevin Rudd was no longer PM or something like that. Which you've got to admire, right?
They do things differently over there. Yeah,
it can go both ways, obviously, but we have to kind of be brave sometimes and put our foot down on things. France knows how to do it.
There is something. I mean, as Pat said at the top, as when we started all this, I mean, there are some changes that could be made to certain parts of. I mean, like I say, as a contractor, and certainly I'm thinking on behalf of small and medium-sized businesses. I mean, there is a lot of red tape involved around things like the Holidays Act, for example, but they've sort of, I mean, Brooke Van Velden's, her comments have kind of left it ambiguous at this stage. But I mean, do you have any hope that that's where this might go, or are you thinking this is going to be in favor of the business, of big business, I should say, specifically?
Jeremy, I think what I hear you asking is will this be a fair negotiation between business and and worker, or will
Yeah.
the government just back business full stop?
Or even actually a fair negotiation between business and small to medium sized employers. I mean, there is a bit of a balancing act there, but do you see any evidence that that's going to be the case?
No, and
Simple. There we go. We're done. See ya.
Thanks for coming, Anita. That's great.
there was a massive amount of work done around this because, and so the trigger for it was there was this point, I think it might have been like 2013 or 2014 or something, when we started realizing that everyone was calculating holiday pay incorrectly. So there's this really annoying thing called relevant daily pay, which is quite a complicated calculation. And the kind of intent of it is that if a worker is off on leave, they should get paid what they would have been paid if they had worked that day. So if they normally work 12 hours a day, their employer can't turn around and be like, I'm paying you the standard like 8-hour day because you're on leave. No, you've got to pay them what they would get otherwise. Otherwise, they're like financially disadvantaged by that. But what it did do was create a lot of problems. And partly it was like because people didn't understand how to do it. And the other part of it was actually that we were just using all of this like Australian payroll software that wasn't properly programmed.
Yeah, I remember that.
To work in New Zealand with our laws. And it was really funny because it was to the point where like even the union that I was working for way back then had to back pay me because they had calculated my holidays incorrectly. So no one was spared, right? And it wasn't this controversial thing where like the left was trying to do one thing and the right was trying to do another thing about it. There was actually consensus that like the legislation wasn't working quite clearly and it needed to be fixed. So there was like this working party under Labour. They came up with like a whole raft of things that they were going to do. It was all looking really promising. And then it sort of sounded like National was going to come in and be like, well, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, like the work's been done, let's just implement it. But based on what Brooke Van Velden presented a couple of days ago to Business New Zealand, it doesn't look like that's the case anymore. She's sort of saying like, I'll have a look at what they've come up with and then we'll do some of it and not other parts of it. So I have no doubt that some of the kind of more beneficial stuff that I have heard about coming out of that working group is not going to be implemented by this government.
It's probably a good point to also mention. I said this the other night on the show that in the last week I've talked to two separate people who are sort of on minimum wage jobs that were having trouble with employees that they should join a union. And if Chewy was here, he would have said this 14 times already in the conversation, join a union, join a union. And I know that we haven't said we're here to do it. We're just doing an advert for First Union. But I guess what I'd like to know from you, from the industry, from the professional, is why should people join a union, whether it's yours or any union for their industry? Why would you say people need to be involved in unions?
I love this, and I feel like I have to declare that I didn't ask you to do this.
No, it's unprompted. Hashtag no ad. That's what we say. We say hashtag also, no ad.
Don't judge us for our crappy website. We know it's crappy, but times are tough. I've actually forgotten what your question was. Why should
people join a union? Any union? Why should people be involved?
Because it's the most effective way to actually bring about positive change in a workplace. Like there's research out there that proves that. And we spend so much time at work. It's completely absurd that we should go to work for 40 hours a week and then just like, sit there and shut up about what we think. We should have influence over what happens in our workplaces. And yeah, the most effective way of doing that is by having a collective voice so that you're not like sticking your neck out on your own. And that, you're actually given the opportunity to like talk about things with your workmates and come up with your own solutions. It's not all just like kind of a top-down thing. One of the things I think about, because when you work for a union and when you're like active in the rank and file as a delegate, for example, you try and recruit people to the union, and it's like quite a hard conversation to have. It's kind of like, if you're like a door-to-door salesperson or something, like that's a hard thing to do, to go up to someone and to try and convince them to like part with their money for anything really.
Yeah.
But what I like to remind myself is, if if like, would I try and sell this product to my family, right? Like if I'm a door-to-door salesperson for like lifetime supply of encyclopedias, like when I'm not on the clock, I'm definitely not telling my mum like, you should buy these encyclopedias. This is a really good investment. But I would definitely say to like any of my loved ones, definitely join a union. Like it's the right thing to do. We're the biggest like civil society organizations that exist, and all of the bosses are unionized. They all have their associations. Business New Zealand itself is what that is. And they also have like a shit ton of money to spend on like driving you into the ground. So the least we can do is like pull together some of our like tiny bits of money and try and do something in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
I always think one of the best arguments for joining a union is just look around and look at the people and the companies who keep telling you not to. That's the best argument. You know, look at the politicians around the world and the major companies who go, "Oh no, we don't want unions." Yeah, that's a reason to join.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Bezos. I think you've given us a good reason to join up.
I
Hey,
was
Anita,
wondering if I would meet
thanks,
some Bezos
Starbucks.
on that.
Yeah.
we've got to do that. Hey, thanks so much for coming on tonight. I'm glad we've connected because, you know, these are the conversations we have on a regular basis. So it's good to know we can now call you a friend of the show and maybe you'll come back sometime.
100%. Yeah, I'm really glad that you guys contacted me, and I'm definitely going to check out the show. I've never been like a very big YouTube person, so I think I'm missing out on
Well,
some
we're
stuff
on
that's out
we're on
there.
YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitch, and then we have our audio. This all becomes an audio podcast that goes onto Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. So you can find us.
Oh,
all over the
amazing. I love
place.
podcasts. Definitely going
there
to
you go.
follow. Thank you so much for your time. It's really great to talk to you.